There have been a few occasions now on the Metal Meltdown where I've gotten so excited while doing an album review that people have often dismissed my comments as being hyperbolic, as being the ramblings of an overly excited fanboy. People have told me that I often over-exaggerate, that I often overhype, that I often ham things up for the sake of an album review, and while I don't fully agree with these comments and criticisms, I can definitely see where they're coming from. I bring this up now not to make some grand point or to make a defiant stance against people who might disagree with me, but to illustrate how serious I am when I tell you that I don't think I am being hyperbolic. I don't think I am over-exaggerating when I tell you, very clearly and calmly, that this new Panopticon album is not only their best album yet, but quite possibly one of the best albums of the year so far, and a genuine masterpiece. And Again Into the Light is the latest full-length studio album from American atmospheric black metal project Panopticon, the brainchild of one Austin Lunn. Over the past decade, his incredibly inventive and haunting blend of Appalachian folk and Americana and bluegrass with atmospheric and melodic black metal has paved the way for some of my favorite black metal records of the modern era. I would honestly go as far as to say that alongside bands like Behemoth and Death Heaven, Panopticon pretty much paved the way for me to finally appreciate and enjoy black metal. As for many, many years, the works of bands like Mayhem, Immortal, Dark Throne, and many more just never really resonated with me, and if we're being entirely honest, still kinda don't. But this style, on the other hand, completely resonates with me 100%, even on more critically divisive outputs like the Scars of Man on the Once Nameless Wilderness. To be honest, for a while, it even stood as my favorite output from Panopticon. Until this moment. As Again Into the Light not only sees the reunion of the band's now signature fusion of folk and black metal, it also shows Panopticon, and in turn Austin, at his most vulnerable, at his most cohesive, at his most triumphant, at his most powerful and honest. This is a deeply evocative, earnest, and revealing album, even by the standards of Panopticon. This is not black metal born out of spite, hatred, or misery. It's black metal born out of honesty, out of humility, out of growth, maturity, out of perseverance and hope. Austin even writes in the liner notes of the album, "To those I have let down or disappointed in my 37 years on this earth, please accept this work as my recognition of a need to change, grow, and to atone for failures. I'm sorry I've let you down and will strive to continue to become a better man each and every day I have left on this earth." Going on to say, this record is dedicated to all who refuse to give up and continue to struggle for light and beauty in this world. Fill your heart with hope, a hope that we will return again into the light. Don't let the fire burn out. And the album's themes of isolation and struggling with mental illness and coming to terms with your failures, your mistakes, your demons, and striving despite all of that to become a better person, to see the light at the end of the tunnel every single day, is deeply fascinating and even cathartic to me. Not just as a critic, not just as a Panopticon fanboy, but as a human being who struggles with mental health, who lives with autism, and who lives in a city whose collective psyche has been harmed greatly in the past year by the COVID-19 pandemic, and even very recently, as Toronto remains the only major North American city in lockdown. For one, the album, even in its darkest and most oppressive moments, is so robust and dynamic and filled with life and love and hope and expressive instrumentation. The opening number, And Again Into the Light, for instance, is an incredibly warm and intimate number filled with beautiful swelling strings and acoustic guitars and slide guitars, contrasted by a very mellow but very charming melody. While I am by birth a Canadian, as a child and as a teenager, my family traveled extensively through New York, through Pennsylvania, through North and South Carolina, and through Kentucky and Tennessee. And as such, I have developed a bit of an attachment to this land that this particular track and many other soft moments across the record immediately bring me back to. Suddenly, I'm reminded of a much simpler time when I spent winters with my family in a log cabin in the Smoky Mountains, and we watched the snow drift off the treetops. It was so incredibly effective that I was almost thrown completely off guard by the more oppressive black metal instrumentation of following track Dead Loons, which itself, quite deceivingly, starts off on a very mellow, almost mournful kind of note with some very simple keyboards and guitars kind of guiding you through ambient soundscapes before the track literally erupts into a passage of almost Atramentus-style funeral doom. And from here on, the signature Panopticon sound immediately dominates and grabs your attention with or without your permission, with its majestic and expressive leads, with its harsh, acidic vocals, with its pummeling percussion, all combining to craft an atmosphere so thick you could practically scoop it out of the air like it was ice cream. The gloomy yet weirdly still optimistic Appalachian folk-infused American atmospheric black metal train continues to roll on numbers like Rope Burn Exit and A Snowless Winter, both of which are steered by inherently chaotic but ultimately beautiful string work with cellos and violins playing directly alongside guitars and drums to create a very powerful, dark and oppressive and stunning display consistently. The ending of A Snowless Winter in particular is a highlight on the record, with a fantastic guitar solo emboldened by more strings and by some incredibly haunting choirs. Then transitioning into the noticeably starker, almost cannibalistic Moth-Eaten Soul. This is a remarkably heavy number, as doom-laden passages and intentionally monotonous chanting drones on in contrast with some explosive and depressing black metal to create something on par with classic material, I would argue, from the likes of Emperor or Enslaved. The combined size and scale of all of these numbers is nothing short of remarkable. It is almost cinematic, on par with the aforementioned Emperor and Enslaved, but also akin to that of, say, Agalloch, or Alcest, or even Weather Systems era Anathema, the latter of which even appearing to be a very prominent influence on The Embers at Dawn, an incredibly lush and genuinely chilling kind of black metal power ballad, if that makes any sense, as it combines the same Appalachian folk and atmospheric soundscapes that previously transported me back to the Tennessee log cabin of my youth, with the more stark and explosive black metal found throughout the most demanding parts of this record. And from here, the album closes on perhaps the most emotionally powerful note on the entire album, No Hope, which, if you remember, was also the lead single for this project. It is an artistically expressive cut more or less about artistic expression itself, as well as the journey of life and the many twists and turns and winding roads that it can often take us on. Similarly, the track musically guides us through an utter maelstrom of post-metal and atmospheric and melodic black metal, of Americana, of Appalachian folk, even including a sample from Guy Voucher of Crass in which she herself discusses what inspires her as an artist and as a human being. It makes for an incredibly beautiful climax to this record, and a very heartfelt one as well when you learn that this track was inspired by and dedicated to Austin's wife. As far as I'm concerned, and this is not a word I throw around very often, this album is a masterpiece from start to finish. Dare I say, a truly perfect album. This is Panopticon and Austin Lunn at their most fully fleshed out, at their most versatile, at their most honest, at their most cohesive and triumphant. It displays an emotional and psychological rawness and honesty that, contrary to popular belief, is not always found within black metal, and for that matter, within heavy music. And as such, particularly in moments that did trigger a little bit of nostalgia, put me in a very deep emotional place. I won't lie to you guys. There were a couple moments where I had goosebumps and was kind of stunned and thrown aback and maybe on the verge of shedding one or two tears. It is a very real translation and to some extent a monument of the undying nature of the human spirit, of perseverance, of the journey of life, and all of the hills and valleys that we must often traverse to get to our most mature and fully fleshed out moments. And honestly, on a very simplistic level, removing all emotional context possible without robbing the album of its soul, it's quite frankly just an extremely engaging and immersive album filled with incredible headbanging riffs, tasty solos, amazing keyboards, and some great performances and production. It is more than deserving of a 5 and a 5, and quite possibly, and quite inevitably maybe even, the title for Best Album, or at least Best Metal Album, of 2021. What more can I say, folks? Honestly, 5 out of 5. It's a perfect record. I look forward to debating with people who once again believe that I'm hyperbolic, that I'm over-exaggerating, that I'm hamming things up for the sake of an album review, and you're more than entitled to feel that, you're more than entitled to comment that, but I simply don't care. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.